Hello, everyone. Welcome, my siblings in speed. I will not maintain this wacky Mad Maxy voice for very long, but it's kind of fun. So here we are. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. And today we've got a very special stream talking about Age of Umbra Sallowlands Road to Nowhere, a adventure frame for Daggerheart created by Jack Panic, aka Dungeon Club. So I had the fortune of picking up a physical copy of this at Gen Con, and I took a look through it and thought it was extremely cool. I refreshed myself earlier today, but this is not going to be a let's spend 3 hours picking apart every single bit of this adventure frame, because I think the more important thing that I want to do in this stream is look through the PDFs that we have, talk about some of the cool stuff that's in here, and then continue the conversation into the topic of what is an adventure frame, or what can we learn about the idea of adventure frames from this project, because of the fact that it is a Darrington Press project, right? It's in partnership with Dungeon Club and it's created by Dungeon Club, aka Jack. But this has, right, the Darrington Press stuff on it. This is not a CGL project. This is a Darrington Press project. And so I think that means that we can draw some lessons or make some guesses about format that Darrington is either experimenting with, I think this is an experiment, and or implicitly supporting or encouraging us to utilize, right? I don't think it is coincidence that this is the framing used, right? Adventure frame, campaign frame. Maybe I will read too much into this, and this is not what Darrington means, and that's totally fine, right? I'm speaking only for myself here. But I thought that it would be useful to not just talk about this project individually, but try to draw some bigger lessons from it for the folks that are watching, whether that's on Twitch or on YouTube, who like to design with the Daggerheart rules, whether you are creating stuff for your own table, or you're creating homebrew to share, or whether you're creating projects to publish using the community gaming license. So with all that said, some quick shout outs. Shout out to Dungeon Club TV for subscribing with Prime a couple of hours ago. That is the one, the only Jack Panic. I got to speak with Jack very briefly at Gen Con, but am delighted to see this out and about. You can get your copy of Road to Nowhere over on daggerheart.com/Umbra or dungeonclub.itch.io/road-to-nowhere. I would encourage you to do both, because if you go on itch, you can also get it added to your collection or your library there, so that it's really easy to go back and download it. Getting it from Darrington will help communicate to Darrington that there is excitement for this project, because they'll be almost certainly counting those downloads. So if you're excited by the idea of Darrington partnering with different creators in the space to do these, like basically to have them come in and do these, maybe probably mostly one-off projects, right? This is still a bit different from if Darrington hired Carlos or I to do a new thing for them, because this has the Dungeon Club branding on it, right? This is a co-publishing kind of deal, though the publishing credits, right? This is copyright 2026 Darrington Press, all rights reserved. So what I'm guessing this is that Darrington and Jack reached an agreement with a contract where Jack would create material that then Darrington owned, right? This is work for hire, is my guess. But this is, this is set nominally in the Sallowlands part of Age of Umbra, it is kind of a non-canon, almost like an AU, alternate universe kind of Age of Umbra AU, which is funny, right? Because it's Age of Umbra is AU. So if you want to see Darrington do experimentation like this, where the wacky offshoots come not from like IP crossovers, but from the creativity of people within the Daggerheart creator space, then we should support this project, talk about why it's cool, and tell Darrington that we are excited about this kind of approach. That is my perspective. Eventualize Ahead One says, wish I could have been at Gen Con for so many things, but getting a physical copy would have been so cool. Yeah, I am very glad that I got a physical edition of this, but I will note that the downloads on Itch and on the Daggerheart site have two things that this physical edition does not, because Jack cannot be stopped and will keep designing. This is a threat, parentheses, affectionate, from Jack, as I take it. So you can get a 2-page write-up of one of the adversaries or NPCs in this adventure frame, and bounty cards to use like they are bingo cards for your characters or your party when they are doing races. And we'll take a quick look through those as we go along. So, right, this is extremely cool, but the digital version has even more stuff. I don't know that we will keep getting things like this. This may just be extra promotional stuff. With that said, let's get into the document itself. So I'm going to be scrolling here. If me scrolling is going to be sensory bad times for you, then this may be a good stream to listen to more than you watch, or just have your have your own PDF copy on hand and do scroll yourself and then kind of catch up as is needed. So we've got our table of contents here within the figure 8 / infinity symbol / Ouroboros of this great road worm, which is the creature that enables / comprises this road to nowhere. All right, so we've got our credits here. And we talk about the road worm. So the premise of Road to Nowhere is that there is this gigantic creature called the road worm that kind of dune sandworm like burrows races throughout the Sallowlands and hunts and eats other Umbra-touched creatures. And the roadworm's kind of supernatural presence is so strong that the Umbra, right, the kind of cloud of mutation and death and terribleness, the Umbra does not touch those who are on or right next to the roadworm. Therefore, there is a community, a settlement that lives alongside in symbiosis with the roadworm, and that is Nowhere. And Nowhere is like a caravan city. It rides along the top of the roadworm, and then when the roadworm has feasted and settles down into this figure 8 shape to slumber, now the city kind of stops, unfolds itself, right? It's kind of a city that is built of or between a bunch of different vehicles. This is kind of like the city of Armada in China Miéville's The Scar, or there's some vibes from like maybe the walking cities of what is that series called? It's one of the series that's cited in the Motherboard campaign frame, which is why I was thinking of it, because I was just talking on the Heart of Daggers Discord about how you could probably adapt Road to Nowhere for Motherboard as well if you wanted, because Carlos Cisco had been talking about how easy it would be to adapt to Colossus of the Drylands. So lots of different options that you have here. So Nowhere has 3 big Mortal Instruments. That is correct, Nerdy. Thank you. Is that Mortal Instruments? Or is Mortal Instruments the one where everybody has daemons? Mortal Cities, City Engines. Anyway, someone will probably remember it. But we've got this city comprised of 3 kind of lashed together megastructures made of a bunch of vehicles. So those are the fortress, the garden, and the garage. And these are basically where people are in charge. Mortal engines, yes, that's it. Where people grow food over in the garden, and then where these ichor fueled machines are built and maintained. The idea here, because this is still Age of Umbra, is that the blood of Umbra-touched beings can be used as fuel for these specially made magic vehicles, right? And some of them are motorcycle-y, and then, as we can see, some of these are more like truck, car, big rig style. If you have not gotten the Mad Max vibes yet, let me tell you, they are here. The list of touchstones for this adventure frame are Mad Max Fury Road, Snowpiercer, A Knight's Tale, The Gunslinger, The Phantom Menace, that's for the pod racing, I bet, Speed Racer, Tremors, Dune, Blasphemous, Death Race, and The Wizard of Oz. So there's a wide array of touchstones. The ones that connect most strongly for me are Mad Max Fury Road, Phantom Menace, and Dune, but you can make your version of Road to Nowhere however you want, right? I described the adventure frame on the Heart of Daggers Discord affectionately as, what if Mario Kart was Mad Max but also Dark Souls? And to that end, Jack mentioned that Nightmare Kart, this video game, should probably also get a shout out. Blood Fuel is very Blaze in the Dark, Leviathan Blood, Electroplasm, etc., says Scary Mushrooms. 100%. It's a fun vein to tap because it gives you that. It means that there's another reason to go out and fight these monsters that normally you would want to avoid as much as possible within Age of Umbra because it's dark fantasy, you're being overwhelmed, but you need the ichor to fuel your dead rigs, because if you want to advance in Nowhere, you have to race pretty much, because when the Great Worm has settled down, it settles into this figure 8 shape, and then people race on its back. Right? They race on the road worm. So that becomes your new. That's your racetrack. It's sort of your Fury Road, but it's the Sallowlands themselves are more the kind of environment of the broader locale of the Fury Road. And then we've gotten our overview of this broader situation, right? We have the road worm, and we have this traveling city called Nowhere, which is comprised basically of 3 buildings that are a bunch of vehicles lashed together. We then get some environments to go with these locations. We have the fortress, which is a tier 4 social environment. The garden is a tier 2 social environment. And the garage is a tier 3 social environment. The fact that all 3 of these are categorized as social more than exploration or traversal tells me that the emphasis, or that there is encouragement to have the player characters not just fighting all the time, right? You are in or come to Nowhere, and there's a number of people around, and you can just interact with these people, but there's going to be some dangers when you do. I'm just realigning this a little bit because the right side of the screen was kind of overlapping with my camera, right? You do not need to expect to always be fighting. In these environments, we do not have potential adversaries listed, which I think is probably comes down to some space considerations, but also because I think the adversaries you could run into are kind of going to be the same for all three of these, and this adventure frame does provide its own new custom adversaries. So in these environments, we are given the lay of the land and something of a sense of this city, how it operates as a ecosystem and as a settlement, right? You can work in the garden, growing the food that people consume to kind of try to make a living. You can try to put together a dead rig at the garage, but also there's scary, messed up stuff happening in the garage that you can investigate or you can get wrapped up in, right? So we have locations which then have environments. And as we're going to see, we have factions, kind of one big faction, and adversary stat blocks that go with that, right? We're being given toys or action figures or play pieces more than we are being given a linear structure. We're being given tools and a situation. Adding to that, we have some NPCs. Calamity Cass, the barkeep and owner of the gas station, which is like the bar in nowhere. We have a racing champion who has been experimented on and used to be a forest guardian, right? Who's a clank, right? One of the kind of automaton people. We have Dead Guy, whose description I love here. Dirtbag do-gooder detective, who every time they die, they will just come, he dies, he just comes back. We have Ramrodicus the Road Warden, who is 100% our Immortan Joe analog, but also kind of a Emperor of the Imperium of Man analog. Right? From his driver's seat, a throne atop the tower fortress, he commands his legion. And then we have this chief mechanist of nowhere, Dr. Senestor Killjoy, who is the person that we get the 2-page spread adversary stat block for in one of these other PDFs that I'll go and talk about in a couple minutes. Notably, each of these NPCs also has a write-up or a paragraph about what happens if you befriend them in most of these cases, and what happens if you become the foe of Dr. Killjoy. So Killjoy and Ramrodicus are our two primary antagonists in this situation. And then these three characters, Calamity Cass, Empty Chassis, and Dead Guy, are people with their own agendas and loyalties and affiliations, but people that you might maybe be a little bit more likely to befriend or be, right? These are key characters that you could be interacting with in this situation or in the locale of nowhere. Then in the middle of the book, we have a reprint of the map of the Age of Umbra Sallowlands region. This is a map by Marco Bernardini. Marco's an incredible cartographer. Shout out to Marco. They're great. Then we get to the meat of what do you do here? Because when the roadworm is slumbering, the people of nowhere do races, and they don't just hold normal races. They have races where you're killing each other, right? These are death races. These are Mario Kart by way of Dark Souls. This is Mad Maxingness with a figure 8 limited track, as opposed to you just have road fights between places because you're fighting over resources. This is still a race. You want to win the races to win money and to gain glory, right? They race for chrome, glory, and pink slips to the death. Here I'm pretty sure that we mean pink slips as the ownership of dead rigs, or ownership of the vehicles, right? You put up your vehicle as your stake or as your bet. The racing in this adventure frame is very zoomed out, very narrative focused. It is not, it's not like you're playing Daggerheart and then you bust out Thunder Road. Even Thunder Road Ignition, the like streamlined version that I got at Gen Con. When you race, you roll 6d6, six-sided dice, and then you place them on this figure 8 like so. And these are your checkpoints. Your characters, when they're racing, are just going from checkpoint to checkpoint for however many loops your race ends up being, right? Maybe you want to do 3 laps. And the race starts at a checkpoint that has the lowest difficulty. So in this figure, it would be this bottom left one or this bottom right one. And then each checkpoint has its speed listed. And that speed sets the difficulty of the roll that you have to make at that checkpoint. But Mike, difficulty 30 is like, that's the highest difficulty in Daggerheart. How could you possibly be making rolls like that, right? 26, 28, 30, those are extremely high for Daggerheart. Well, when you are racing and a custom mechanic that is included in this adventure frame is the speed die. And the speed die is rolled alongside your duality dice, right? So when I am racing in Road to Nowhere, I roll my hope die, my fear die, and my speed die. And my speed die comes from my vehicle, my dead rig, in I think almost all situations. There's other, like NPCs have their own speed die, but NPCs work differently, right? Because Daggerheart is asymmetrical. For player characters, you roll your speed die in tandem with your duality dice. When you make an action roll while racing, if your speed die is higher than your hope die or your fear die, you roll with speed, right? So you can roll with hope, roll with fear, or roll with speed. And that has some specific mechanical outputs when you roll with speed. The biggest one is that your vehicle, your rig, has a unique boost that you can activate by spending a hope or for free when you roll with speed, right? The output is you get to use your speed thing, which is your boost. Additionally, you can roll a crit by getting the same number on any two of the 3 dice, right? If I roll a 2 on hope, a 5 on fear, and then a 5 on speed, that is a crit between fear and speed. Pitbull Station, welcome to the chat. Completely new on Daggerheart, but this sure sounds Mad Maxy and Death Racy. Absolutely, right? We are drawing on those touchstones, or by we, people playing this, right? I did not create this. Road to Nowhere draws on touchstones like Mad Max and Death Race, both of which are credited as touchstones in this project. So it's taking inspiration from those media and going, okay, cool. How can we do this in like a Dark Souls-y post-apocalypse dark fantasy kind of place? Oh, well, we're going to have our vehicles run on the ichor blood of monsters. And the track is actually the back of this gigantic centipede-like worm as it settles into the ground to sleep after it eats. Also, if you roll triples, right, the same number on hope, fear, and speed, you get a boost. right? Because it counts as rolling with speed, effectively. But you also get the normal critical bonuses, right? Normally on a critical, you gain a hope, clear a stress, and you get some kind of additional bonus. I think it's going to be up to the GM to decide whether on a triple critical you get normal critical stuff, a boost, and then some kind of other benefit, or whether the boost is your normal benefit. I'm inclined to give them the boost and something else because it's so unlikely to roll a triple critical. Right? You need all 3 dice to come up with the same number. But differing size speed dice is going to impact how often you roll with speed and what your chances of rolling a triple critical are. Some other mechanic stuff here, right? The racing part is the mechanical core of Road to Nowhere, which to me suggests that it is meant to be the narrative and plot core of this adventure frame. You come to Nowhere, and the thing you do in Nowhere is you race. And that all the other social, political elements of this settlement emerge from and inform the races. So when you're racing and you hit a checkpoint, you have to make a roll. This is a checkpoint roll. What I will highlight here is that failure does not mean you're out of the race at all. On a failure with hope, you get left behind as you deal with a hazard, right? So you have to deal with a hazard before you can catch up to the pack. On a failure with fear, you nearly wipe out, forcing you to face a hazard, and you have disadvantage on the next checkpoint roll. So it's worse than a failure with hope. You don't just fall behind to face a hazard. You're also going to have a harder time catching up when you make that next checkpoint roll. But you're just making checkpoint rolls, dealing with these different hazards as you go around and around and around. And then we determine who wins with basically a final roll. So you can be behind, take damage, but as long as you can get back to the pack by overcoming your hazards, you can have a chance to win, which is great design, I think, in order to not punish players or to make people feel like, oh, well, why should I even bother staying in this race because I'm, 3 rolls behind. Rather than using like chase rules, the custom rules here keep everybody involved while still really streamlining the process to a series of moments, right? One of Daggerheart's, I believe, best practices, because they all just smoosh together in my brain. One of the best practices is work in moments and montages, right? So a race is going to be a montage or a sequence, right? A bunch of little moments that are all strung together, as opposed to this is one scene where we see every moment of what's happening. And then we have a quick table list for checkpoint hazards. So each number on the D6 has its own type of hazard. And when you make a checkpoint roll, that's the thing that you're having to deal with. Right? You both make a roll to see how you do with at the checkpoint pace-wise, and you deal with whatever the checkpoint hazard is, I believe. Because, right, as you deal with a hazard. So I need to go back and read this more closely to decide whether I think you have to face every hazard every time. Because the faster way is you only have to deal with the hazards on these failures, right? Because on a success with fear, you begin to fall behind. And there's this note about how people are going to just be attacking you, and you can choose, instead of making a checkpoint roll, to fail with hope in order to get to make an attack against an enemy racer. Because one way to make sure that somebody can't win the race is if they're not racing anymore because they are unconscious or dead. We have some rules for team racing, or how you can link up your rigs to have your kind of characters working together a bit more closely. And then we have some specific environment rules for the death race itself, right? This is a special event death race, and the difficulty says use checkpoints, right? The difficulty is going to be the difficulty of a given checkpoint rather than there being one set difficulty for the whole death race. Also notably, it doesn't have a tier, right? This can happen at any tier. So Road to Nowhere scales with your campaign as you need it to, right? If you're going to plug this into an Age of Umbra campaign, it can show up really anywhere, and a lot of this other stuff can scale, though some of the adversaries and environments have more set scale. And that might mean that your player characters come in, they visit Nowhere once when they're tier 1 and tier 2, and everything is kind of bigger than them, and their ability to change the faction landscape or the destiny of people of the settlement is maybe a lot more limited, and they are going to have to come back some other time or work their way up within Nowhere, right? If you want to do a whole campaign that's focused on Road to Nowhere, there is that potential to come up through the ranks by racing, by making connections, by working, and things like that. You know, because basically whenever the people of Nowhere need Icor, one of the things that is hit a few times in this adventure frame is how there are pressures, right? There's too many people and not enough food, too many people and not enough fuel, because they're doing these races, but also they need fuel to just kind of keep their vehicles going, because that's kind of how they have power, as I understand it. And we get some special rules for Icor itself, and then some breakdown of like, these are the rigs you could have, right? You could have one of these 3 starter rigs to race with, which is a standard beater, a bike, sacrificing armor for speed, or a kind of big, tough vehicle. And each of them has a starting speed die, right? So this tank tumbler has a bigger speed die, but these boosts on the other ones are pretty great, because a lot of your piloting rolls are going to be finesse rolls. Hello, revealing too much. Welcome to the Road to Nowhere. Strap on your goggles. Pour some Icor in the engine. Assorted bits and metaphors related to the vibes. So, then we get some costs for upgrading your rigs. This gives you the potential for progression as a racer. Again, we're getting more material in the adventure frame that is pointing us toward not just racing, but racing several times, racing repeatedly, right? Like we are in a league, and in between races, there's going to be chances for social interaction. There's probably going to be times when you have to go out and hunt for Umbra-touched creatures to get Icor, because you're not just going to be provided with Icor unless you're in a position to be able to demand it, or you're trading favors, or you've got the gold. And then we have some rules on cool special boosts that your rigs can get with their own mechanical benefits. Now, we've got a short selection of custom adversaries for this adventure frame, starting with the biggin, the roadworm itself. This is a big nasty. So your chances of... You probably don't want to try to kill the roadworm for some time. Those thresholds are not huge for a tier 4 adversary, but also if you're trying to kill the roadworm, you're kind of trying to kill the thing that keeps a lot of people safe, because this whole settlement travels with the roadworm, and because of its presence, they are protected from the Umbra. Ooh, Flash Flood warning, no good revealing too much. I hope that that passes soon and without damage to you and yours. We've had some pretty big storms here in Chicago the last week or so I can empathize. One of the things that is great and wonderful about Daggerheart is in-jokes and wordplay with features. So life as a highway instead of life is a highway from the song Life is a Highway. So life as a highway. And there's a special downtime move you can do while you're resting on the back of the worm. And then we have this sick piece of art where people are doing stunts, like riding off the front of the roadworm, it seems. And because it's a biggin, it has a few other things, including an environment to represent its digestive tract, right? Being swallowed is an event environment, but not a terribly difficult one. And then we have a couple more features. We also have guidance on how long the roadworm hibernates based on the tier of the creature it consumed when it was hunting for food. Right? So at tier 1, it just settles down for 1 day. You might not even be able to do a normal race. People might just kind of stop and repair their stuff. Tier 2 gives you a week, tier 3 gives you a month, tier 4 means you are hanging out for a whole season. Right? That's 3 to 4 months, depending on what you want your Age of Umbra calendar kind of thing to be. Right? The roadworm is not a colossus, but it is kind of colossus scale. And then we get this odd, cool thing of an environment within a creature, which the colossus rules kind of overlap with in some ways, but these are all just different tools. And then we have highwaymen, who are kind of your, right? They are very much a standard type adversary. When you are in nowhere, you will run into highwaymen, and these are the kind of gangster, biker, war boy type adversaries. And we have a chart for giving them a name and a vibe. So, right, you roll 2d12. I get a 7 and an 11. So this is Wheeljack, whose vibe is Lancer with a lance, like on the cover, which notably, and some people will have probably noticed, is definitely a reference to Akira, right, the anime. Though the art is like substantially different. We get a kind of mechanical monstrosity thing called a bullet spitter. So there's just another type of adversary that you can meet here. And then like a Umbra ghost that fits within the vibes of Road to Nowhere. All right, so this kind of ties this adventure frame into the Age of Umbra setting a little bit more tightly. And then we've got some tier 4 minions, right? They are a skeleton crew, who are a crew of skeletons, who are a skeleton crew. Ba-dum-bum. Right? So these are tier 4 minions, so you can mow them down by the dozens. Notably, our descriptions here are a little bit beefier because they are also doing some world building of here's not just what these are physical description wise, but sort of how they fit into the setting and what they do. Because our tactics section is extremely condensed for each of these, right? It's 1 to 3 words per tactic. And then almost at the end, we've got special equipment. Mechanist chains are basically power lines for this setting. And then there's a couple of things your characters can get. We have, of course, a flame-throwing guitar to honor the Doof Warrior from Mad Max Fury Road, I imagine. And then a couple of other things. We've got the special rule about gear that is broken. Some of the gear that you will find or buy in this adventure frame is broken, and so then you basically are repairing it during a rest. It doesn't take a downtime action to do it. You just need downtime to repair a broken item. And then we've got our credits page here, right? Jack Panic, words, layout, art, map illustration, Marco Bernardini, Age of Umbra Sallowlands, created by Matt Mercer. And we know from the front that so in my print version, it says developmental editing, Danny Gage. And then that's our back cover. So I said I would quickly jump through the other things, and then we're going to pull back and talk about adventure frames more broadly. Like, what can we infer and extrapolate based on this release? So that's the sponsor cards. Here is our write-up for Dr. Killjoy, who is a Tier 3 solo. And we're going to zoom back out a little bit to make this fit. Dr. Killjoy, of course, has the Roadworms figure 8 tattooed onto his face, which is extremely cool. And this is a more filled out adversary write-up, right? More on the scale of the Roadworm. We have actual boxes to fill in for HP and stress, which is very handy. Some experiences, a write-up, motives and tactics along here. This is almost like a wanted poster, which is also really fun. And then some fairly extensive features, right? Dr. Killjoy has his own event, which is that he creates a doomsday device, and there is a related environment that is an obstacle that the Doctor constructs. So we have we only have 3 features written out, but then there are 2 environments that come with Dr. Killjoy. Also, I notice here, villainous phrases contributed by Cameron Strittmatter. Cameron is the, I think, owner, head. Cameron, I don't actually know what your title at the Panic Table is, other than I think you're the person that runs it. I know that you GM basically everything. I don't know that we've gotten to talk much directly. I appreciate what y'all are doing. So just adding some credit there. And then we've also got 6 bounty boards, which are bingo cards, effectively. And these give you challenges to do during a race. And if you complete them, depending on the pattern, you get specific bonuses, right? Bounties in gold or other bonuses. And then it gives you kind of a play aid that is a reminder of how racing procedure works. The fun thing here is that you can print this out and give it to the player characters, either for each of them getting a different sponsor, or you print out several copies of the same sponsor card. And it also serves as a play aid because you get this procedure section. So that's a really nice touch. There are 6 of these, I believe. So the sponsors are Metal Horse Craftworks, Kingsman Cleaners, Pottery by Darvos, Swords and More, Rotworm Bakery, and of course, Dungeon Donuts. So there's that. I'm going to zip right back to the front of this. So this is going to be very fast scrolling. Give you a little bit more warning. Here we go. We're just going back to the top here. So this is, right, that whole thing was 20 pages plus we're at 3 pages for that Killjoy write-up and another 6 for the bounties. So if you're just printing this all out from the PDFs, you're talking about 30 pages. Word count wise, I would bet that this adventure frame is shorter than most, if not all, of the campaign frames from Hope and Fear, just because of the zine size here. And right, this is probably one of the most densely packed pages word count wise, and I think that's still relatively low. I haven't actually done a breakdown. I didn't do the thing where I kind of copied and pasted the words from every page to get a word count the way that I did for my Patreon post a few weeks ago that was about Hope and Fear. But coming back, now I'm going to move us over to my notes page. Come on. Okay. We're going to change what window we're using. Here we are. And then I'm going to make this go away so I can still see my chat. Boop, boop, boop. Live production, everybody. Nerdy says, the Sallowlands runs on Dungeon. 100%. Would love to get like a Vine length commercial to that end in this kind of orange and black style. But Jack is a very busy person. We don't need to demand more work there. Maybe Darrington will do it. Darrington, you want to make this that ad for Dungeon Donuts? Okay. Now let's talk application. Right? We spent most of an hour looking at the example, right? Road to Nowhere as an example of an adventure frame. Based on that, what can we take as inspiration or possibly guidance from Darrington through Jack's example of what an adventure frame might be? What an adventure frame is not is a specific linear instruction about playing through a particular plot, right? If we compare Road to Nowhere to The Wish Thief, Dying Spire, Sablewood Messengers, or even Marauders of Windfall, which has not been reprinted for the final rules, but right, was published during beta. I was the lead on that one. I know it was run at Gen Con this year, so I'm guessing there will be a new version published, but I couldn't tell you when. Those have a specific structure and order, right? They're 5-act stories. I believe each of them was written as a 5-act adventure. So those are adventures, and this is an adventure frame. And what I like about this structure is that it gives you a lot of the pieces you would want from an adventure, but it does not tell the GM or the players what order they have to do all of these things in, or even exactly what you have to do. You could engage with Road to Nowhere and never do a race. I don't think I would recommend that because you're kind of missing out on what I said, kind of the mechanical core of what is presented here. But you could start at tier 1, have Road to Nowhere appear kind of next to where your characters are, and have them get kind of swept up into the gravity of this Ichor-fueled Mad Maxy world, and kind of start out as nobodies and get kind of shat on, bullied around for a while, sent out to die with the hope that maybe they could bring back some Ichor or a beast to then become fuel. And then something happens, they survive, and cool, now they're level 2 characters, and suddenly they're a lot more capable. And you could fight your way up and only start racing maybe in tier 2, possibly even tier 3, depending on how you do your adventure, right? This could be a whole campaign. It'd be a pretty focused one. that might be shorter, but it could easily be a story arc that you complete to be one of your levels, right? You could spend a whole tier engaging with Road to Nowhere, I imagine, right? Especially if you were at tier 2 or tier 3, I think. If you're at tier 4, you kind of come in and you're already at a level where you could just kind of try to bowl over the leadership of this settlement. Championship campaign, maybe. If I'm guessing what you mean, Nerdy, you mean like kind of like a racing league championship, racing tournament arc kind of a thing? If so, I totally agree, right? There could be, if you're plugging this into your Age of Umbra campaign, there could be something in Nowhere or a person in Nowhere that is who you have to find, retrieve, rescue, kill for in order to be able to progress some other plot line. So the characters have to come into this world, orient themselves to what's going on within this settlement, and then accomplish their objective. And it could be that they can only do that if they get an audience with Ramrodicus, right? You figure out what do they need and how do I put that behind them needing to engage with racing, right? Or is there some mysterious figure that only shows up for races? And so you need to get into the league to be able to be in the same place as them so that you can talk to them, take something from them, get something from them, whatever it is. But to pull back again, right? This is sort of how I see adventure frames. They give you locations that come with environments. So you have these tools for playing through the area. Hey, thank you, Jota Pekruja, for subscribing with Prime. That's 7 months, which is a lot. A shout out also to Pitbull Station for following the channel yesterday, and Jawa Swag 19086 for following 1 week ago. I don't remember if that happened during the stream or after. Thank you regardless. Nerdy says, yeah, like having the narrative between races unlock bonus upgrades to use in the races. 100%, right? If you want to focus on the death race, Mario Kart, pod racing kind of element, then you have that. You have your procedure. You have your procedural narrative, which is you do a race. And because we have mechanics for the race, we can have drama within the race itself rather than the race creating drama in other situations. You could even have maybe some player characters in the race and some player characters doing something around the race or during the race, right? It's like, oh, the only time we could sneak into Dr. Killjoy's lab to do something is when there's a race on because everybody is at the race paying attention there. But we need to field a team. So, right, 3 of the 4 PCs are going to do the race and 1 of them is going to sneak in or something like that. Again, what this adventure frame gives us is tools and materiel. Not one adventure to run, but a bunch of pieces and information about how they work and how they relate to each other that then the GM can apply or implement as is needed. And that flexibility, that lack of specific dictated structure is, I think, the special sauce that I want to draw attention to in this adventure frame. Not that this is the only way people should design material for Daggerheart, and not that it is necessarily the best way for every person or every group, but this is a different structure than what Darrington had published previously when we are talking about adventure material, right? We have adventures that had kind of a, they default to linear. And then we have this adventure frame, which has a bunch of different tools and structures. I could easily draw a linear plot of here's a maybe 4-session arc of a Road to Nowhere storyline. But 3 other GMs could each take this material and create extremely different story arcs with that, using all the exact same material with pretty close interpretations of that same stuff. So that is pretty cool. Pitbull Station says, Daggerheart is going through a fantastic moment. So yeah, I've been researching the system and this channel popped up. Good find too. Well, thank you so much, Pitbull. Yeah. So if you don't know me, my name is Mike. I was an additional designer on the Daggerheart core rulebook. I was lead designer on Marauders of Windfall in beta, and an additional designer on Sablewood Messengers, which is Daggerheart's quick start adventure. And I also create third-party Daggerheart material, Daggerheart-compatible material, using the community gaming license. And I am lead designer on the Dungeons of Drakkenheim Daggerheart campaign guide, right? And that's yet another framework campaign guide, but more on that when it's done and out. Thinking about what you want in making your own adventure frame. Equipment, loot. I think if we're using this as our template, we want locations and environments, at least one major faction, and some adversaries that exemplify it, other NPCs to interact with that have relationships to and or are kind of stand in or represent those factions, a core thing to do, right? What do you do in this adventure frame? In Nord to Nowhere, you do dead rig races. And here we have the example of the thing to do has its own mechanics, so that doing that thing has mechanical support and, perhaps most importantly, feels special and distinct. There is an implication of an arc or a progression arc to follow, as indicated by the fact that you can upgrade your rigs, by the countdowns associated with certain adversaries and NPCs, where you have to do X or Y several times in order to activate something. This is also suggested by the motivations and goals of NPCs and factions within this situation. I think we probably want some associated equipment and loot, because that's pretty fun, and highlighting that stuff will help make this adventure frame feel distinct, feel particular, like you had a specific experience. And we want to have some tools and ideas for faction and character interactions and plots that the NPCs are carrying out, right? If the PCs didn't show up, these plots would still happen in the world, but because the PCs are here, they can interact with them. Jota says, Road to Nowhere is the kind of stuff I wanted for the existing frames. The adventure frame structure is really cool. I agree. 5-act adventures work well for conventions, but I find it hard to add the PCs into them. With an adventure frame like this, I can tailor to the table easier. I can definitely see that. So in a world where Darrington made the worlds of the campaign frames themselves available to publish in the CGL, that would make this type of adventure frame really easy to do, but I think we can do it anyway without even skirting the edge of the CGL. And this is how we do it. We kind of have an example in Carlos Cisco's Pistol Heart anyway. But if I wanted to make an adventure frame that I intended people to use with 5 banners burning, I could, and this would probably be a little bit harder, but I could create an adventure frame that was a nightly tournament and then talk about this person comes from this kind of a noble house and this person comes from this kind of a faction, and not just file the serial numbers off, but take a fresh approach at creating the types of NPCs and factions that could plug into Five Banners Burning as a frame while being pretty solidly their own. That might be easier for some frames than others, right? I think you could adapt Road to Nowhere to Colossus of the Drylands or to Motherboard without a lot of difficulty. Motherboard is both of them have different tones than Age of Umbra, so you'll need to do adaptation there. But I think you could do an adventure frame meant to be used with Castle High that was, here's a Skyland and cool, interesting stuff to do here. And then the way you write it intimates that people are coming here by flying and that there is the rest of the world somewhere else away from the Skylands. And then you make it parallel to, but not dependent on the specifics of anything from that IP, right? Darrington Press does not own the idea of magic schools. So you could have something that is meant to attract people from magic schools. The more direct ties you bring in, the more careful you need to be. I am not a lawyer, but I think you can square that circle where someone could make an adventure frame. You would publish it as an adventure frame compatible with Daggerheart. All right, if I were doing my tournament, it would be, the Grand Tournament of Arms, or right, when I was in the SCA, we had Rose tournaments, right? So if we had the Rose tournament, a Daggerheart compatible adventure frame, and then I had a whole situation related to this tournament, and I make it so that player characters and the factions from Five Banners Burning can slot into that, or outputs from that campaign can be good inputs for this adventure frame. And then it's still really usable for somebody who is specifically playing that adventure frame, right? You could have I could create a town with a fistful of dollars Yojimbo kind of situation, right? There's two rival gangs and they are fighting over who controls the town, and in controlling the town, controlling some resource. Well, I can't have it be Essentia because that's part of the Colossus of the Drylands IP, but I could have it be a silver mine, a coal mine. It can be something else that a GM could easily replace with Essentia, but I don't say that in the material itself. I just create a situation and material that resonates with and can plug into or accept outputs from the particular campaign frame. This becomes easier on the 25th of this month when, to the best of my understanding, Darrington is going to update the SRD and the CGL such that the specific mechanics from all of the campaign frames from Core and Hope and Fear are added to the SRD and can be then used in CGL material. So I have too many things to work on, so I can't jump onto this right away. Therefore, I challenge you, dear viewer, to make an adventure frame iterating on this format, because I want to see them. And I agree with the folks who are saying that this is promising to them and they feel like it works really well for Daggerheart, because I agree, right? Even if Road to Nowhere was not Darrington implicitly saying, here is a framework we want to give you for how you might design adventure material for Daggerheart that isn't a linear adventure. Even if that was not consciously part of Darrington's intent, and I can't know because they haven't said, we can take it as inspiration to try to do so. As long as we're, following the CGL and the SRD, then let's get cooking. I'm working on things that are not super dissimilar from this, but on different scales and at different levels of kind of where I am in the project. Is it possible that an adventure frame could be an option as a stretch goal for Hope Dies Last? Anything is possible. Many things are possible. This is not something I've talked about with Infinite Citadel, but it's certainly a thing I could pitch them. And if any of you are here, Andrew, Matt, or Conlon, this is probably something we should talk about because it feels very doable within the scale that we've been talking about for this project. So, pretty cool. Could be a fun option. Revealing Too Much says Skyland is one of the name of the main locations in their world, in our world. And this is probably for naturals. And then one of the things I love about Daggerheart, and I feel like this was emphasized at the Gen Con workshops, was that Daggerheart asks you to bring your own creativity to the table. Frames don't give you every piece, they give you inspiration. Right. Makes perfect sense. Definitely the kind of thing I have also said. Hope Dies Last stretch goal, you say? Question mark, question mark. Eyes emoji. That could be pretty fun. But I have to finish up my work on Dungeons of Drakkenheim. I have Hope Dies Last. There are other projects that are in different stages that are not announced yet, but are things that I'm working on. So it may be that one of you who is watching is going to be able to create and publish an adventure frame taking inspiration from the format that we see here before I do. And if you do, I want to know about it. So if and when you do that, I encourage you to publish on Heart of Daggers, tell people about it on the Heart of Daggers Discord, and, reach out on Blue Sky or something and tell me, because I want to see what people do with this format or iterating on this format. We're at about 75 minutes, which is a good time frame for one of these streams. So I'm going to do some wrapping up and sum up. As a reminder, you can get your copy of Age of Umbra Sallowlands Road to Nowhere is the full title, by Jack Panic of Dungeon Club, published by Darrington Press, at daggerheart.com/umbra or dungeonclub.itch.io/road-to-nowhere. I encourage you to download it from Darrington once to let them know that you're excited about it, and go and get it on itch.io, and then go and check out Jack's other Daggerheart-compatible work, because nobody is cooking with Daggerheart like Jack Panic. Jack's experimental design and very strong visual capacity as a graphic designer and game designer means that Dungeon Club material really sits on its own in a cool way that I draw inspiration from. I would specifically draw your attention to How's My Driving, which is a kind of modern horror project where there's an adventure associated with it, and the Bureau of Chronological something. Apologies for forgetting the name. Where did it go? Bureau of Chronological Affairs, sorry, which is giving Doctor Who, it's giving Loki, it's giving Control. So those are the two that stand out the most to me and have a few different things that all go together. So that gives you some more material to utilize. And then I would be remiss to not shout out my own material at ttrpg.fund/HDL. You can go and follow my project Hope Dies Last, which I mentioned coming to crowdfunding next month. where we'll be doing a print edition of Bastion of Hope, my Defiant Fantasy campaign frame, as well as developing 2 new campaign frames, one in cyberpunk and one in space opera, plus creating a 4th zine that is, we're calling the Mechanical Nexus, which adds modular mechanical tools and resources to use in any of those 3 frames or adapt to your own campaign. So some comments in chat from people. NSman says, thank you for the stream. Thank you for watching. Mick Too Much, you were lurky worky, totally fine. Always great to hear from you. Thank you, Jota, for coming by. Adventure lies ahead. Amen. Jack is doing lots of cool stuff. Agreed. Jack Panic oozes such a unique style. I'm very jealous in a good way of it, says Revealing Too Much. Agreed and same. And Dungeon Club TV is here in the digital flesh. I'm very glad that you enjoyed the stream. Apologies if I misunderstood anything. Look forward to getting to engage with more of your stuff and chatting sometime as circumstances allow. And yeah, your Dungeon Club is just Jack. Digital flesh as a title. You absolutely take it. So yeah, that's that. This was very fun. I'm glad that everybody can get their hands on this adventure frame now, and I'm excited for what it means for the future of Daggerheart-compatible design. Thank you for being a part of this discussion. Thank you to folks who are watching later on via VOD at Twitch and or YouTube. And if you have questions or comments about stuff we talked about here, the best places to put those are in comments over on YouTube or on my Patreon. Thank you all, and we'll see you next time.